here at the Malloy LRC or by television somewhere else in the facility.
Yeah.
A very warm welcome to our distinguished guest, Senator Edler, Representative Smith, our spouses and family members, and our most important guests of all, our veterans. The 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month in 1918 ushered in the end of World War I. A year later, President Woodrow Wilson established November 11th as Armistice Day. In 1954, after World War II and the Korean War, Congress changed the name from Armistice Day to Veterans Day, a day to honor all veterans, living and deceased, who served in uniform defending freedom in every conflict or time of peace. Before we get started our program today, I'd like to give a big thank you to all of our program participants. Colleen Benj on the piano, the Marshalltown Men's Chorus for providing our vocal musical. At this time, I'll also mention that the Marshalltown Men's Chorus will be performing a Christmas concert here at the Iowa Veterans Home December 17th at 2:15 p.m. Please join us. Chaplain Doty, Brad Shipley and Mike Hines, Amy Demerly, all of our fantastic volunteers. We could not do it without you. And the IVH staff who help escort residents to the program. Now, please stand if you are able for the singing of our national anthem by the Marshalltown Men's Chorus, and please remain standing for our invocation offered by Chaplain Doty.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
If you'll join me, let us pray. Oh God, we give thanks to you for the courage and sacrifice of the men and women of the armed forces. It has been through their dedication to duty and your bounty that our country has continued to remain free. As we celebrate this particular day of emphasis in our country, we come to realize that you are the one who has given to us courageous individuals to lead and to serve in our military forces. And for that, we are thankful and grateful. We pray a special blessing upon each veteran throughout this land, and especially for those at the Iowa Veterans Home. Be with those veterans who are ill or hospitalized. Touch those who are struggling emotionally, and may your presence be known to each who needs to experience your grace. And we pray that as our nation fights this long war, the war on terror, that you will help this generation to continue to step up to the challenge, that you will keep us as strong as our predecessors, and that the United States will continue to shine as a tower of hope and peace to the world. For we ask these things in your holy name. Amen.
Thank you, Chaplain. Please be seated. Let us join now together in a moment of silence to remember and pay silent tribute to the American veterans for their service and their sacrifice in defending our freedom, with special remembrance and gratitude to those who gave the ultimate sacrifice, their lives, in defense of our precious freedom. Thank you. The Marshalltown's Men Chorus will now perform America the Beautiful. Of the 11th day of the 11th month, we gather to honor our veterans, those who have passed and those who are still in our midst. On November 11, 1918, 99 years ago today, an armistice of peace between the Allied nations and Germany ended the war to end all wars. Of course, it was not the end of all wars. Years before and in years since that day, 99 years ago, men and women have served in the United States military, some giving their last breath in the service to their country. Today we gather to honor Americans' veterans for their service to our country and their sacrifice for the common good. As it states on the Marine Memorial in Washington, D.C., uncommon valor was a common virtue. We are here today to honor all veterans, past and present. All veterans, no matter which branch of service, the Army, the Navy, Marines, Air Force, or Coast Guard. All gave some gave all. A quote from my Uncle Charles, United States Marine Corps World War II veteran. For those of us who fought for it, freedom has a flavor the protected have never known. Today's honored guest and speaker knows about service and sacrifice. Mr. Ray G. Hamilton, Captain, United States Marine Corps, is a jet pilot having flown over 245 combat missions during Vietnam conflict. and during a 29-year FBI veteran. Mr. Hamilton is a former instructor pilot in the U.S. Naval Advanced Course Jet Training Command. He was recommended by his squadron to fly with the U.S. Naval Flight Demonstration Team, the Blue Angels. He taught law enforcement with the FBI for over 20 years and is recognized as the Master Police Instructor by the FBI. He is currently a special investigator for the Department of Justice in Washington, D.C. On this Veterans Day, it is my extreme honor and pleasure to welcome Captain Hamilton, United States Marine Corps, jet jockey to the Iowa Veterans Home. Captain Hamilton.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you for allowing me to be here today. I got some comments. We'll talk about a couple of things. I want to first off say to our cherished commodity, the veterans, it's your day, and we will celebrate it. To the Vietnam veterans, welcome home. I'd like to acknowledge and thank Jerry, Commandant, Nolan Doty, the chaplain, and our distinguished guests from the state legislature. Thank you for allowing me to be here. I would like to start out by saying when Brad, where's Brad? Brad called me and asked if I would come and speak. I said, sure, give me a flavor for what it's all about. And veterans, of course, be the honored guests. And I got to thinking, oh, these folks would be maybe elderly a little bit. And I looked in the mirror and I said, well, I'm elderly too. Yesterday was the 242nd birthday of the United States Marine Corps. Semper Fi, all you Marines out there. 242 years. And well, I began looking in the mirror and I said, no, I'm one of the elderly geezer types too. So I got to thinking, we deal with a lot of issues as we get older. You know, sleep doesn't come as well, or you're up and down at night. One thing leads to another. Can't remember anything hardly. I'm lucky that I'm married, so I don't have to write anything down or memorize anything because my wife surely knows what's on the ticket for the day, if you will. Reminds me of a story. How many here know or heard of Art Linkletter? Huh? Yeah, he used to be on the radio years and years ago in the 1940s. And then he was on television. He had a show called House Party, and then he had a book he wrote about the kids, and it featured on his television show, Kids Say the Darndest Things. And I think Art Linkletter lived to be 95 years old. Even in his 90s, he would speak 200 times a year across the country to different gathered groups, just like this. And on one occasion, he was speaking at a senior elderly assisted living home, and he says, as the story goes, he said he'd get a great speech, and there was a lady right up front row, and she was awestruck with him. She was just on edge of every word he said. The speech was over, and they're having coffee and donuts, and this lady walks up to him, and she says, you know, we just had the most marvelous speaker here. He talked about this and talked about that, you know, and he's getting the drift of this, you know, and he's trying to interject and interrupt, but she kept on going. She said, finally, he said, ma'am, do you know who I am? And she looked at him and she said, no, but if you go to the front desk, they'll tell you. Suffice it to say, Washington, D.C. is a mess. It's gridlock. It's just one convoluted, upside-down thing back there, and they can't get much done, which is very frustrating for folks like you and me, that we have to depend on the decision-making and the actions taken by those in charge back there. Kind of an example of what Washington is like, and it came to me in an email, anonymous, but it kind of sets the tone for the way things are. I'd like to read it to you. It's very short. It says, I have a job. I work and they pay me for the job. I pay my taxes, and the government deducts and distributes taxes as it sees fit. In order to get that paycheck, in my case, I'm required to pass a random urine test, which I have no problem with. What I do have a problem with is the distribution of my taxes to people who don't have to pass the urine test. Makes a little sense here. So here's my question. Shouldn't one have to pass a urine test to get a welfare check because I had to pass one to earn it for them? Please understand, I have no problem with helping people get back on their feet. I do, on the other hand, have a problem with helping someone sitting on his or her butt doing drugs while I work. Can you imagine how much money each state would save if the people had to pass a urine test to get a public assistance check? I guess, and this is the kicker, I guess I'd call that program, you're in or you're out. Anonymous, but it's right to the point. The big problem in this country, the way I see it, as an educator, I was educated, had a teaching certificate in the state of Illinois, never practiced that vocation in the classroom in the state of Illinois. I did it in the Marine Corps, I did it as a flight instructor, I did it in the FBI as a master police instructor. Education is a big issue in this country, or the lack thereof. How many people here have heard, oh, one other issue, one thing I want to mention about Washington, D.C. is now we've created a whole new arena. But what are we going to do with monuments and statues? Think about it. What are monuments and statues? What is the national anthem? It's a poem put to music. It's an historical document, if you will, that originated in the War of 1812 in the Battle of Baltimore. In that national anthem, I think third stanza or third verse, there's a reference to slave. And now people are talking about maybe we ought to get rid of the national anthem because it has a negative connotation. It's a historical connotation. It's a historical word. So Eisenhower, General Eisenhower, in speaking of historical and significant things, when they moved through Germany at the end of World War II, they came across the concentration camps. Disgusting, unbelievable set of situation. And they wanted to, they asked Eisenhower about, well, what are we going to do? And Eisenhower said, I want to bring, General Eisenhower said, bring all of the citizens from the communities nearest the concentration camps, put them to work here. Document it all. Film it all. And his closing comment was, you know why? Because 100 years from now, people won't remember. Or they'll say it never happened. And they're saying that right now. It never happened. So it's important for monuments and statues and documentation to be maintained so there's a record from whence we came. It's important. Significantly important. So I say, as an educator, if I was in charge, I would not fail our children. Anybody here heard of Texas Tech University? Anybody here go to Texas Tech University? Okay, well, I'll tell you one thing about Texas Tech University. They have a political science department, and they had you can look this up, excuse me, look this up in YouTube. Texas Tech University 2014 political science, and there's a question, meet the students on the street. And they walk up and they ask the students, hey, who won World War II? I'm serious. Where did we gain our freedom from? And the students couldn't answer any of the questions. They were wrong on all of them. They couldn't tell you who the vice president was. And it's amazing that this got published or put out in the air. But they could tell you who was married to who in Hollywood, who's, what political affiliation they couldn't do anything but just the basic stuff that they saw on television. And it was purely for their own indulgence and entertainment. Had nothing to do with academia on the campus. Sad state of affairs. So I say we are failing our children. And I remember as a student and as an athlete, it was very important, I thought, to be taught what I needed to know. And those who taught me were the tough ones. How many here heard of Bobby Knight? Okay, show of hands, good. How many here have heard of Mike Ditka? Okay. How about Joe Arpaio? All right. Vince Lombardi and Johnny Wooden. All right. They were all coaches and or significant persons that have had an impact on a lot of lives. And for the most part, even John Wooden, who very rarely raised his voice at anyone, could stare icicles through you. And he had the respect of those that played for him. All of these folks that I mentioned, taskmasters, they were the tough ones. And they made you perform. And if you didn't perform, given the opportunity, hey, that's your problem. But they were there, and you know what? Most of them were criticized or pretty much let out to pasture long before, just because they were taskmasters. The Pledge of Allegiance is a commitment oath. Not about involvement, but about commitment. And that's important. And there's a big difference between involvement and commitment. It's like the dynamics of ham and eggs. The pig is committed, the chicken's involved. And we've got to be committed in this country. When you say the Pledge of Allegiance, every time we have a meeting of our chapter of the Vietnam Veterans, Chapter 299 of the Quad Cities, we start with the Pledge of Allegiance. So does the Rotary. It's a commitment oath to the flag and to the country. It's important. And we don't take it lightly. And we don't take our flag lightly either. I forgot a group I should have mentioned this morning, besides all of you veterans, a special group, the Tuskegee Airmen, World War II. Now there's a group that went through it all and rose above it and survived. And they are to be applauded. My 5-minute speech is over. I want to thank you all for allowing me to be here. It's been a pleasure. I wish you all good health and Godspeed, and God bless our firefighters, our first responders, our police officers, our veterans, and God bless America. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Captain. On behalf of Iowa Veterans Home, a little token of our appreciation.
Well, thank you very much. This is great.
Speaking of taskmaster, because I'm not sure some of the staff doesn't believe that of me. It is now my honor to read the proclamation from the Governor's Office of the fine state of Iowa. State of Iowa, Executive Department, in the name and by the authority of the State of Iowa proclamation. Whereas every year, Veterans Day is a time to reflect on the service and sacrifice of our generations of all veterans, those men and women who have given selflessly of themselves to defend our freedoms, and we are constantly humbled by their strength and courage. Whereas the history of Veterans Day goes back to the armistice, also known as the Treaty of Versailles, that ended with the hostilities of World War I. The treaty was signed in the Palace of Versailles, outside the town of Versailles, France, on June 28, 1919. Whereas the fighting had ceased 7 months earlier, when a temporary cessation of hostilities between the Allied nations and Germany went into effect on the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month. And whereas in 1938, November 11th, was dedicated as Armistice Day to honor the veterans of that conflict, and in 1954 was expanded to honor American veterans of all wars. And as Our men and women in uniform have been the bearers of proud military tradition that has been dutifully passed down from generation to generation for more than 2 centuries. And whereas, in times of war and peace alike, our veterans have served with courage and distinction in the face of tremendous adversity, demonstrating an unflattering commitment to American and a people, many have made the ultimate sacrifice to preserve the country they loved. And whereas the selflessness of our service members has always been, continues to be, unmatched, and they remind us that there are few things more fundamentally American than doing our utmost to make a difference in the lives of others. Whereas on Veterans Day, we pay tribute to our veterans, to the fallen and to their families, to honor their contributions to our nation. Let us strive with renewed determination to keep the promises we have made to all who answer our country's call as we fulfill our obligations to them. We keep faith with the patriots who have risked their lives to preserve our union with the ideas of the service and sacrifice upon which our republic was founded. Now, therefore, I, Kim Reynolds, Governor of the state of Iowa, do hereby proclaim November 11, 2017 as Veterans Day, and ask all Iowans to make Veterans Day 2017 a special welcome home for all who have served our nation, regardless of which war or conflict, including our newest generation of veterans who have served in the post-9/11 era. Let us shine a light on all of them and say thank you for their sacrifices and all they have given while serving our country. In testimony whereof I have been unto subscribed my name and caused the great seal of the state of Iowa to be affixed, done at Des Moines on this 10th day of November in the year of our Lord, 2017. Signed, Kim Reynolds, Governor of Iowa. Today we remember the service and sacrifices made by American veterans in every conflict and in time of peace since the founding of our nation. A big thank you to our veterans for your service. I would like all veterans to please stand or raise your hand to be recognized. Each generation has faced challenges to peace, and its soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines, and Coast Guard will be sent into harm's way. I found this saying online: some dream the dream, some live the dream, some defend the dream. God bless the defenders. Without the nation's defenders, our freedom, our liberty, our American way of life would be at risk. God bless the defenders of America. The Marshalltown Choir, men's choir, will now perform God Bless the USA.
If tomorrow all the things were gone, time to stand and say, yes, it's time to stand and say that I'm proud to be an American, where at least I know I'm free. And I won't forget the ones who died, who gave that right to me. And I gladly stand up next to you and defend her still today. 'Cause there ain't no doubt I love this land. God bless the USA. And I'm proud to be an American, where at least I know I'm free. And I won't forget the ones who died, who gave that right to me. And I gladly stand up next to you and defend her still today. 'Cause there ain't no doubt I love this land. God bless the USA.
Thank you, Larry, and the Marshalltown Men Force. Thank you very much. Thank you for joining us today. Senator Evler, Representative Smith, Colette Binge, of course, I thank you. The great volunteers here at the Veterans Home, I thank you. The great staff. The staff is one professional staff that is here, and I thank you. I might be a taskmaster some days, but I thank you. It's a great staff. And to all you veterans that are here, thank you. This is your day. I would now like to ask Chaplain Jody to close our program with the benediction.
Let's close with prayer. Holy God, we ask for your benediction to rest on us this day. As you have graciously preserved our nation through the years and have led us in wondrous ways, grant that we may be worthy of our high calling as a nation. Make us reverent in the use of freedom, just in the exercise of power, and generous in the protection of weakness. Inspire men and women who direct our nation, that they may guide it wisely and well. Grant us in all our duties your help, in all our perplexities your counsel, and in all danger your protection, and in all sorrow your peace. Amen.
That concludes our program for this afternoon. For today, thank you again very much for all attending, and thank you for your veterans. We couldn't be here without you. Thank you.
Donald M. Windrow. When did I serve? 1943 to 46.
I was in the Marine Corps from October of 1963 until the Ides of March 1970. Basically was a fighter pilot and flew 249 missions in Vietnam. All of the missions were North Vietnam. I didn't fly any missions in the country. It was all in support of activity in North Vietnam. I survived. I think that's I love that part of it. I made it back, and that's not to say that we didn't have some tremendous losses. 58,000 of our brother and sister warriors did not make it back as part of the participation in that Vietnam War. I think that everybody should serve in some capacity or another, regardless if it's in the military or public service, but all people in this country should be vested, I should say, be vested in their country. And
Ken Wilson, Army,
And what war did you serve in?
Vietnam. Well, I started out in basic training. I wondered why I was the only one that didn't go to combat, but I thought it was probably due to my left eye is 20/100, and but I wasn't. So I was sent to Fort Sill, Oklahoma. Went to electronics school, which was all taught by civilian instructors, and then a year later, after some experience in a unit down there, I was sent to Vietnam. And we were 3 troops of tanks and 1 troop of helicopters, and I was their communications sergeant. And that was basically it. Never left Pleiku except for R&R in Taiwan. We were just, our troop was the helicopter group, and we just never could go anywhere. They were always doing something, you know. Somebody had to be in contact with them. Because as most pilots know, sometimes you get vertigo, you know, and you're flying into the ground and you need help or correction or getting oriented, and just weather. 6 months out of the year over there, it rains continuously. I'd been told when you took off at Cameron Bay, everybody just cheered, and our airplane had, you couldn't hear a peep. Took off, stopped at Japan, fueled, got into SeaTac, and they never told us anything about not wearing your uniform like they did other people. And so I had mine on, and I got on the plane, and I just fell asleep right beside the tray that the stewardess sat down there, and never woke up till I got to Detroit. I was just so relieved. Then from Detroit to Des Moines was one of the worst storms I've ever seen. I wasn't familiar with airplanes could take lightning, and there was lightning on the tips of the wings, and we were dropping just thousands of feet. We would just fall, and then we come back up, and pretty soon the stewardess sat down beside me and buckled in, and I had enough farm logic to know that that was not good. Because she had been serving coffee, and you could tell she thought it was too dangerous to be walking or attempting to walk. But we made it back to Des Moines, and I met a guy there from my hometown. He was about 50. His father had died, so the patrolman decided to just take us to county to get us home to Brooklyn, which was 60 miles east of Des Moines. And so they did. They relayed us right to my front door out in the country. And my mom was really shocked because she figured I'd call and somebody'd have to come get me. And she looked out and saw this patrol car, and I got out. It was an interesting situation. Vietnam vets watch Ken Burns' Vietnam show and see all the stuff that nobody ever showed us, or our parents, or anybody. It was just really the emphasis was on getting that war won so we could make sure our economy got back. And it wouldn't do that if we weren't making planes and helicopters and stuff. It's an excellent, excellent show. None of us, we were talking the next morning about the pictures of the tanks going out. Our tanks from the Tet Offensive coming back in with like 21 dead bodies on them. Nobody ever saw that. And they just came one after the other. North Vietnamese had been in there for 30 days and were dug in and had caves and beat the living tar out of us. They stood right in front, one at a time in front of the tank barrels and shot back at us. That's how nervy they were. I have all respect in the world for them, just as soldiers. They were smart. In that film, they will ask you, how do you know where the Americans were? They smoked. They left cigarette butts everywhere they went. We get up every morning, find the cigarette butts, and follow them. And the other thing is, they very seldom kept their mouths shut. They talked too much. So we knew where they were at. You don't do that. We'd go for days without talking. Hand signals, they said.
Okay, these flags are done by the order of service. The Army would have been the first served, so their flag is on the left in the first order. Then you would go to Marines. Navy would be the third flag. This one's the Air Force. They would have came in after the Navy. Now the Coast Guard is interesting because this is the order that they're put in peacetime. In wartime, the Coast Guard would be over here in back of the Navy, next to the Navy flag. So it would supersede in order. And then you have the Merchant Marine, and then you have the POW MIA.